Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Project Infinite podcast, the podcast covering the infinite and ever-expanding multiverse of fandom. From movies, comics, TV shows, video games, we've got you covered. I'm Rob. I'm here, as always, with Court. And Court, if you have my tone is down, it's because we have a very kind of heavy episode to do today, because we felt it was the right thing to do, given the circumstances of the last 2 weeks. Given the passings of both Kevin Conroy and Jason David Frank, obviously known for their roles as Batman and as the Green Power Ranger, and Tommy Oliver, two absolute pillars of the 90s, we decided we're just going to sit and have a chat about these two legends of the 90s and our favorite moments and just what those two characters and actors meant to us. So that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, and like we always said, these are always unfortunate, and I know we usually start episodes with these, but we think, talking fandom as we do, I think these garnered their own episode, and we can kind of try to immortalize them, because they were huge parts of our childhood. I mean, I know for you, I know you had a lot of love for Kevin Conroy. It's funny, because I feel like the Kevin Conroy one hit you harder, and the Jason David Frank hit me harder. I was an absolutely massive Power Rangers fan when I was a kid. Just a little history on that. I know I started with, Ninja Storm is what I remembered, and then Dino Thunder was the first one when I remember being a young kid and waking up every Saturday and going to watch Dino Thunder, and when the season was coming out and getting all the toys for Christmas for it, and lo and behold, that's the year that Jason David Frank came back to help revitalize the franchise, because I believe that's when they moved back to Disney, bought them back. So it's really full circle moment to understand how big of a childhood he had. So after I watched Dino Thunder, I definitely had access to YouTube at too young of an age, and somebody had every single episode of Power Rangers on YouTube. I watched every single episode of Power Rangers up until Dino Thunder that entire summer. I was binging the whole thing, and through that you see from the inception of Power Rangers in the American eyes, and the face of Power Rangers is Jason David Frank. It's these action heroes, these colorful action heroes when you're a kid, but one of them stood out amongst the rest. And you know why these two are so entwined with each other? It's because they had so much dedication to one thing. It was the one thing. Obviously it's not the only thing they did, but it's not like other actors and voice actors. They truthfully were their roles. Kevin Conroy, he is Batman, and Jason David Frank is the Power Ranger, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it when we talk about Kevin Conroy, but I mean, a lot of his story as it relates to Batman is his own self-identity and his discovery as a member of the LGBTQ community when he came out as gay, and how that really shaped what he eventually turned into as the voice actor for Batman. I mean, I think DC actually made it free right now, the comic that he penned, Finding Batman. I think in the wake of his passing, they actually made that free to view, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I mean, just going down the Jason David Frank route, it's funny hearing you talk about your experience and your introduction to the character, and going back to YouTube and finding the Mighty Morphin, but that was my show when I was a kid, It's the first show I can remember vividly watching. The Power Ranger kind of side-scrolly video game for the Super Nintendo is the first video game I vividly remember playing, and the Green Ranger was, I thought, at the time, the coolest character I had ever seen. Just the costume, he had the gold-plated shoulder pads, he had his own Dragon Zord, and I'm pretty sure every year for Halloween when I was a kid, I was the Green Ranger or the White Ranger, the Red Zeo Ranger, Red Turbo Ranger, any iteration of Tommy Oliver I could get as for a costume is what I would follow. He was the first superhero for me, truly, at a time when also Batman was running parallel, as so many kids looked up to Batman, I looked up to the Green Power Ranger. So yeah, we'll talk about both of them in droves in a little bit, but we do have some news to get through. First and foremost, some news right before we started recording this. So Disney has had a massive shakeup at the top of the chain. So Bob Chapek is out as the CEO of Disney pretty abruptly. We don't have a ton of details on this because it literally just happened. And the former CEO, Bob Iger, has stepped back in, and he will be assuming that role once again, effective immediately.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I mean, the big thing for Bob Chapek is the comments that he made about kids and how adults consume movies and all those things that he was saying that a lot of people were, you know, pretty upset about or didn't agree with. And me and myself didn't agree with anything that he said. And you have this universe and this massive, possibly the biggest, you know, fandom that's ever been built. And having your CEO say something like that, it could be a little disheartening because you built your brand on magic and this magic of wonder and exploration of art, which is pretty cool, no matter what your age is. And I think Bob Iger was there for the Marvel Ascension. Bob Iger was there when I can't remember when Bob Iger started, but I mean the most notable in recent history is the MCU, him being over there, and also for Star Wars. Say what you will about the sequel trilogy, it made money, and for him, that's probably a thing he wants to do is make a little bit of money. But it's an interesting choice. I know Disney's about to hit their ground running, especially with all their non-Star Wars, like the actual Disney pieces.
Yeah.
They have a lot of content coming out in the next 3 years. So.
I think we just got a trailer for the, the Elementals?
The Elementals, yes.
Just
so
got a
the
trailer.
next Pixar movie. Willow's coming out on Disney+. Percy Jackson's coming out. You have the Little Mermaids coming out. So they have so many things that are coming out. So I think they want the surefire thing, the guy that saw the correct direction for the MCU and the, you know, quote unquote correct direction for Star Wars, a profitable Star Wars, I will say. So I think they want him at the helm and kind of are understanding that they need to just make sure everything's safe for a little bit because you're doing a lot of projects that can either go left or right. So they probably want the guy that made sure a lot of things went right while he was there.
Yeah, it's very in the vein of, you know, sports teams do this with coaches, you know, over and over again. Like a coach will leave and then a new coach will step in and then maybe the success isn't quite there, so they turn and go back to excuse me they go back to the old coach, you know, and that's kind of what this feels like. They're going to something familiar, and you know, in the wake of the comments that Bob Chapek made, they clearly, I guess, didn't feel maybe he was fulfilling their vision, right? Because at the end of the day, the CEO is not the end-all be-all of a company. He can be easily upended by a board of directors, and that's the situation that arose here.
Oliver Queen learned that the hard way.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, go back to what works, go back to what's familiar to you, and that's what they're doing. Who knows how long-term it is, or, you know, if they're just doing this because it's familiar and they're going to look to go in a different direction, or if Bob Iger is truly back. It's definitely newsworthy and noteworthy and very interesting. Given the timing also, I mean, our last episode was literally about a movie that's on track to make well over $700 million at some point in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And yeah, it's just an interesting move to be made. More Disney. I think most of this is Disney stuff, to be honest with you. We got a look at Indiana Jones proper.
Yes. For
Indiana Jones 5, so Harrison Ford is back.
Yep.
So we saw a quick little good image of him.
Yep.
Looks like Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and I know he's very excited to come back to this, and I'm very happy that he's getting a chance to put this character to rest in the right way. And the right way to do it, in my opinion, in Hollywood, I guess, for either your superhero or your Phantom characters, is you get James Mangold out in the movie. And I really enjoy James Mangold's work. Ford vs. Ferrari, Logan, I think he is supremely talented, and I think I think this is a weird thing to say, but you know what James Mangold understands? He understands, like, the older man. Like, he understands, like, the man in his 40s plus that's just, like, either last-ditch effort or needs to prove a point or needs to come to terms with something. I think James Mangold, that narrative he really sticks through with, which is really, really cool and really incredible. So I think to give him Indiana Jones is a phenomenal choice. I think he's a great filmmaker, so I can't wait to see what he does with that.
Yeah, and we also got to look at Mads Mikkelsen as the villain.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, so as the villain of the piece, a Nazi.
Yeah, and this movie does take place in the 60s because I think it goes 30s, 40s, 50s, and now this is the 60s for the last piece of it.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll see how this turns out. I mean, Harrison Ford is obviously in his 80s now, so it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what the physicality of the role looks like.
He's got a lot of work ahead of him, too.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
You know, the Indiana Jones movies, on the whole, are some of the best, you know, action adventure movies that have been ever been made. Yep. And like you said, Harrison Ford in particular seems to be very excited about this one. So, and
they're holding it hostage at Disney so he can play Thunderbolt.
So he has to play the Red Hulk.
Yeah, specifically the Red Hulk. Yeah, he said, "Can I just put the mustache on and play the president again?" They're like, "No, you have to be the Red Hulk." And he said, I
don't wanna.
I don't wanna. We have Ke Huy Quan hostage. You're gonna do what we say." And he said, "I'll do anything for him."
So yeah, that's neat. We got some more casting for the Percy Jackson Disney Plus series, so that's shaping up. It's news that we didn't talk about. I think it was last week or the week before, maybe, that we got it. But Lin-Manuel Miranda is going to be playing Hermes. That sounds pretty fun.
Cool,
considering the character of Hermes, and Miranda's a very exuberant kind of actor and very performative, so that seems like right at home. And then what was the other casting for Hades, right?
Yeah, or for it was
Hades and Hephaestus.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and who were they being played by? I had it and then I got rid of it because we were doing some other deep diving.
We're doing some other deep diving.
Hold on, please hold.
We're here. It's J. Duplass.
Okay.
Is going to be Hades, and Timothy Olminson is going to be Hephaestus.
I thought you were going to say Timmy Oliphant.
I also thought Timothy Oliphant would probably play a good Poseidon. But listen, you got the blueprint for what you do for Poseidon. You just make it Ryan Reynolds, right? You just keep the Adam Project thing going.
Yeah. I think I don't think we talked about Jason Mantzoukas as Dionysius.
No, we did not.
So that was another one. This cast is pretty stellar.
It's pretty cool, yeah. And I think Disney garners a lot of people coming into their projects, and especially something like this. From all intents and purposes, what I've been hearing about like the show and what the cast has been saying, like they feel like they're onto the magic of what Percy Jackson is, and I think Disney's a good place to have something like Percy Jackson. I mean, I spoke to my admiration of those books when I was younger. When I read those, that was like everybody was a Hunger Games fan, but I felt like I was a big Percy Jackson fan, like just a deep dive into the world. Like I said, I think ending that on The Last Olympian, like when Percy's older, I can't remember the actor's names that's playing him why can't I remember his name? We loved him in the Adam Project, and now I can't remember his name. But I think I can really see his progression is going to be really fun.
Walker Scobell,
and I think him himself is going to be a big name in Hollywood. But I think they're putting together a really cool cast, and
very great.
I can't wait to see kind of one of these things I loved during my. It's funny we're talking about what we are today, and I'm getting to see another thing from my childhood come to life.
Yeah, it's going to be. It definitely seems like they're putting their all into this. It's going to be very big budget.
Yep.
I think, and again, we keep going back to this through line of it almost always seems to work out when you have the original creator on board, and that's the case with this also.
Yes.
So I think it's going to be, I think it's probably going to be pretty good.
Yep.
We have some Fast and Furious news.
Oh, boy. boy, oh boy.
It's been a while, but we do have some Fast and Furious news, so I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but it's certainly news. Due to, reshoots and salaries and global inflation and a host of other things, the budget for this Fast and Furious 10 movie has reportedly inflated in excess of $385 million, which would put it on par with Avengers Endgame in terms of budgetary scale. Wow.
Are you ready? What are they doing in these movies to garner $340 million? Like, what is this movie about to be about?
I have
What do
no
they
idea.
need 340? The Rock's not even there. Like, what do you need $340 million for?
I couldn't even begin to tell you. I don't know.
I mean, we will say those Fast and Furious movies do generate a lot of revenue. Like, they do.
Yeah, they're right up there with, the $1 billion hits and other movies. So.
I just think the Fast and Furious, like, I think the time, like, they had a very specific time where they were hot. I think it's gone now. Like, I don't think people are, clamoring for Fast and Furious anymore. I think people had it up to Fast 8, and then Fast 9 came out, which still made money, but now I think these movies are just memes at this point. Like, they're not, and sometimes some of the action that they do in the movie is cool. Like, they do some practical stuff that's pretty cool, but I mean, Fast 5 or Fast 7 was the last time, like, the narrative felt like semi-organic and like actually like, emotional stakes, and then 8 happened, and then it's just they start turning into caricatures, and then 9 is just crazy.
Yeah.
And then I think they're going to double down on what they did in 9 and 10.
It feels that way, yeah. I mean, we talked about this franchise briefly on this here and there.
It was one of the pillars of this thing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it knows what it is,
yep,
which is good.
I gotta respect that at the end of the day.
And we'll see if we get to a point of diminishing returns when it comes to knowing what it is. Yeah. I mean, I think, I think Venom 2 kind of suffered from this a little bit, where the first and second movie both know what they were, but the second one was kind of diminishing returns a little bit.
Well, the second one also was trying to they didn't really care about the actual movie itself. They were just, we need to get this out before Spider-Man No Way Home comes out.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, in a lesser extent, I think Thor Love and Thunder is also a victim of this, of knowing what it is, but, again, diminishing returns in terms of, like, doubling down on I guess, what they thought people loved about Thor Ragnarok, and kind of double down on that aspect of it.
Yeah, what I think for that, and I don't want to talk too much about that movie, but I think the face front was, this movie's funny and Thor's back, but the thing that in my opinion, that people subconsciously grow to was like, that movie was surprisingly emotional. Like, that movie did have a lot of darker and sadder bits, and his entire family was killed and cut down, and he finally rekindled the relationship with his brother, had to see this dark version of what his brother or him could have became, and kind of had to understand that it's a journey piece of oneself, like discovering oneself and all those beats. And I just think in that movie, I think they knew when to take it seriously and knew when to have stakes, and I don't think Love and Thunder has that. I don't think they know when to take that movie seriously, and that's the biggest downfall. I think that's also what She-Hulk suffers from. I know it's both are comedies, but they don't understand when to make those side characters and your main character kind of, somebody with credibility and stakes.
I think there's moments where it does that, particularly in the second half of the movie when it comes to, when they get to the what is it, the Shadow Realm.
Yeah.
And that whole thing kind of kicks up. I think it does get to those dramatic moments, but
is that not just Christian Bale kind of carrying that himself on his back?
I think there's genuinely dramatic beats in that movie that just don't quite go far enough. Like, for example, like when Gore stabs Valkyrie, it's a very like visceral moment, but then it's kind of just recouped.
And then it just played for laughs. And when she's back on Earth, it's just played for laughs.
Yeah,
it's
she's like recouped very quickly. Right. I think the Thor and Jane stuff probably could have worked a little bit better, but again, it seems like they pulled back a little bit. And I don't know why. Because
the movie's called Love and Thunder. Like, that was what the sell was, essentially, is this was going to be like a rom-com, like an MCU rom-com.
Yeah, and I mean, Taika's done dark and dramatic, and he's leaned into it.
Right, I mean, and I talked about Barry earlier this week. That's that's where you got to think about for this. Like, you could have played Thor and Love and Thunder as like a satire comedy, which Ragnarok kind of is, but they also know when to take it to like I said, some of the best comedies have some of the best dramatic beats, and I think that's what it meant. We talked about Thor Love and Thunder for too long. Yeah, that movie's really dropped my rankings since I saw it, and it's really unfortunate because I really thought what people didn't like about Multiverse of Madness, they were going to get back in Thor Love and Thunder. And then it's funny because I flipped. Like, I appreciate Multiverse of Madness so much more than I did. And, like, I just feel a little bit sour at Thor Love and Thunder than I thought I would.
Yeah, that's definitely fair.
At least we got Miss Marvel this year.
We did. So Amazon has moved in on Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly.
It's like a Wild West for Spider-Man rights.
Yeah, so they've ordered a bunch of stuff from Sony. I think the big one was Silk, a Silk show,
right?
Which I think had been rumored as a movie for quite some time.
Right, they wanted to put that in the normal Sonyverse with Venom and Morbius. I guess they wanted that, but interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know Amazon was in the market for Spider-Man. So, did they announce anything else?
I believe that was... I mean, there's rumors spinning about about Across the Spider-Verse and how this is going to try to connect every single thing that's ever been in the Spider-Man universe. But no, it's just, I guess it's called Silk Spider Society. And I guess it's the slate of Marvel Sony series at Amazon.
Okay. It's very, very interesting. Yeah. Partnership with Prime Video and MGM Plus for a full slate of Spider-Man spin-off series beginning with Silk. I mean, look, they've been trying for quite some time to do a bunch of different Spider-Man properties, right, that don't have anything to do with Spider-Man. Venom obviously is the most successful one, but then they've done Morbius, they've done or they're doing Madam Web, which is intriguing. And then this, and then we'll see what happens with the other things that they do as far as like the Sinister Six. But we'll see what happens with that. I mean, it just seems like Sony just has their properties, and whatever that they can do with them, they're gonna do at the end of the day, you know. And I still think at the end of the day, ultimately, this all just revolves around whatever they decide to do with Tom Holland. Like I think they're starting to understand that. I know that there's a Venom 3 script done. That's the only other thing I think I'd be interested in seeing out of these spinoffs. And then, I mean, I haven't heard a peep about Morbius.
Nope.
So, who knows? Yeah, Silk. Interesting. What do you know about Silk?
I'm dying currently. I'm passing away as we speak. Jeez. Silk is like genetically coded to Spider-Man himself. It's the same, I think it was from the same spider that spit Spider-Man. It's like not the Into the Spider-Verse, the actual Spider-Verse comics, like the big one from 2013 from Dan Slott, like the same spider that bit Peter also bit Cindy Moon on like that same day. So like,
what are the odds?
Well, the odds are high because it's a comic book, but she's like, they're like attracted to it. Like it's much more of like a primal attraction. Like they're like they're attracted to each other.
Oh. Yeah.
So it's interesting. She's there.
Cool. All right. Amazon, look out.
Look out. Yeah, you got a hit on your hands. Who plays Silk is the real question.
I don't know.
Karen Fukunaga. She's already on The Boys, but she's too old for that, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
This is Katana.
Nope, we're not doing that.
Remember when she was Katana in Suicide Squad?
Yes.
I can't wait to talk about that movie.
We'll talk about it when they do the air cut.
So we're never going to talk about this movie.
I didn't say that.
We just add that to the list of ideas that we got.
Okay, yeah, so I don't even know how to transition into this. So I guess we'll just start with just talking about Kevin Conroy. Sure. So we talked about the passing of Kevin Conroy at the top of the last episode when we talked about Black Panther, that he passed away at the age of 66 from a short battle with cancer. And it was just very, very sad. And it was just like weird timing, you know, talking about Black Panther and losing Chadwick Boseman, and then now the voice of Batman is gone. Literally, the voice of Batman is gone. Right. And, man, just like I said, this Batman the Animated Series came out in 1992. I wasn't quite watching it, like, in stereo. I think I might have caught it when I was a little bit older, when it was more, like, in syndication, and it was part of, like, that Warner Brothers Saturday morning cartoon run. But it's, I mean, as far as legitimizing, quote-unquote, Batman, I mean, it borrows a lot of themes from Batman 1989. Yep. It's almost like a spiritual sequel to Batman 89.
Believe that.
And they, Kevin Conroy brought instant legitimacy and gravitas to the role.
Yeah, he made this kid show credible, I think. And just his voice alone, it's like, it's got this bass to it, but there's this boom. Like, there's this calm in the boom, too, which I appreciate. It's very contained, but you can feel the weight of every single word that he says, and that's great voice acting. He's adaptive, too. I love his Bruce Wayne as much as I love his Batman. His Bruce Wayne is it feels very billionaire with purpose, I think. He's got so much intent behind him, and I think Kevin Conroy, no matter how old he got, his voice is just so unique. where it could be old, it could be young, it could be 21-year-old Bruce Wayne versus 50-year-old Bruce Wayne. He can kind of encompass all of that, and I mean, I can't say much, but he is definitive. Like his voice is so definitive. You know how rare that is, because these comic book roles are so blown out now because of, you know, how big the genre's gotten, but he truthfully does have it locked down that, like, that's the voice anybody instantly goes to. Like, when I think Batman or read a Batman comic, like, specifically I read Court of Owls, and Court of Owls picks up, you know, prime Batman with all of his family there, which leads into Death of the Family. You think Kevin Conroy, like you generally feel his voice, and then the one that really got me is I finally started reading Grant Morrison's run on Batman, which is apparently incredible. It's one of those things where some people hate it, some people love it, so I have a feeling it's going to be great. And but you can tell that feels like Batman, like that truthfully feels like Kevin Conroy's voice in there, like down. It's just he's got this low octave in his voice that just really presents like the brooding nature of Bruce Wayne.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman. You know what's amazing? Just looking at, you know, the rundown for Batman the Animated Series. It only went for 2 seasons. It went for 85 episodes. It feels way more, way bigger than that. Yeah. And then, I mean, obviously, the journey continued for him with Justice League, with Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
Where
Batman
I think a lot of people, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about his passing last week, that he had this incredible longevity with the character that you don't really see in voice acting. And it was because they gave him the opportunity to play so many different versions of the character. It was Batman the Animated Series, you know, where he had all these crazy Batman adventures. That's obviously where we got, I mean, heck, Batman the Animated Series is so big it literally gave birth to Harley Quinn. You know, like that's a character that originated on the animated series that is now one of the most beloved characters in DC Comics.
But he's got one of the best antagonists with him, and then if Joker and Batman are synonymous, I believe, in my opinion, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are also equally as synonymous. They bounce off each other incredibly, and they really are the yin to their yang.
Yeah, it carried over, you know, obviously, and then, you know, Batman Beyond, he's playing the older Bruce Wayne, gave way to, and I mean, Will Friedle, who voiced Terry McGinnis, has been said that like the relationship between he and Kevin Conroy was almost like the same relationship between Bruce and Terry, you know, for Batman Beyond. Because think about that for a second, like how daunting that is for Will Friedle to, like, he's essentially becoming Batman, you know, stepping in for, as we've said, the most iconic Batman that's ever Batmaned. And then, you know, you give way to Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and which is...
Yeah. You know what's great about that? It's because now he's with the rest of the Justice League, so the human amongst these gods is just a really cool concept, and I think the best thing about Justice League Unlimited, Kevin Conroy, is he holds his own, and his voice still booms throughout everybody. It's a voice that they listen to, it's a voice that leads them, and it
has some of the best moments in that show.
Yeah, it does have some of the best. That show as a whole is really incredible for, like, a kids animated show. It's got some really great world building for the DC universe. So.
Yeah, I would definitely stress, you know, people going on HBO Max and picking up Batman the Animated Series, picking up Justice League Unlimited, because even though they're geared for kids and they're animated and whatnot, but like
comics are for kids. It doesn't,
and all that stuff still holds up. I mean, and like you said, like he's really Kevin Conroy's iteration of Batman gave way to like the idea that Batman's like the cornerstone of the Justice League. That's why a lot of people feel that way, is because of Kevin Conroy's Batman. Like, he brought such a legitimacy to the character that, like, you could buy that this guy in a bat costume could walk amongst these other godlike beings. Simply because of how Kevin Conroy performed the character. You know what I mean? And then again, just adding to this incredible longevity, like, you know, Justice League Unlimited ends its run in 2006. And then from then on, he's kind of doing like the DC, he became like the voice for like the movies, like the animated DC movies. Like, he was synonymous with all of that. And then so like I said, Justice League Unlimited ends in 2006. And then in 2009, a company by the name of Rocksteady would change
Some small game company called Rocksteady
kind of redefine the superhero genre of video gaming with Batman Arkham Asylum. And
because video game comic book characters and comic book narratives in video games were very Ultimate Alliance, but they were very like clunky.
You had your Ultimate Alliances, you had your X-Men Legends,
Spider-Man.
And then that was probably the cream of the crop at the time, was the Spider-Man tie-in games that were based on the Spider-Man Raimi films.
Right, but at that time, games like God of War were running rampant. Like, those are your big games. I mean, your Jak and Daxters, your God of Wars, like these first-person games with these iconic characters. And I guess somebody said, hey, if Batman's the biggest comic book character that we have, and I think... What I think makes it even better is that they probably floated around other characters like Superman, but they said, hey, that's going to be a little tougher at the time because how are we going to, give him a credible villain to fight? It's going to be, he's too overpowered. But Batman, you can give a very human story while doing that. And boy, those Arkham games were incredible, but a big piece of that is Kevin Conroy himself. The voice
that was the
acting
biggest. That was the biggest coup. That was the biggest decision that I think they made. They could have.
Yeah, they could have got anybody.
They could have got anybody. They could have. They did. When you Rocksteady didn't develop Arkham Origins, but when they did Arkham Origins, Kevin Conroy was not the voice of Bruce Wayne, and incidentally enough, Arkham Origins is kind of viewed as like the redheaded stepchild of the Arkham series because, Troy Baker did a great job as the Joker, but, again, that you lose it. Like, it takes you out of it almost when he's not the voice of Batman, you know what I mean? And getting him and Hamill and Tara Strong to come back as Harley Quinn, it was almost like... For people like me and you, it was like an extension almost of the animated series.
Yeah, it was an extension of the animated series that felt again like this idea of you pick up a comic at any time in the prime of any character's career, and that's what that felt like. He's getting trapped in Arkham for the first game, which is such an incredible thing. But it's just this idea that Kevin Conroy, it's what does it justice is it's the same thing as what Kratos does now. In the 2018 and the 2022 games, it's that he's kind of... I know Kratos was with Atreides, but he's with his own thoughts, and you're finally with him, with his own thoughts. Like, you get that with the animated series, but now it's like, I can control... I am Batman right now. Like, and through Kevin Conroy, I am Batman.
Yeah, you're almost like this passenger. Mm-hmm. And right. Kevin Conroy is right, like, there guiding you along the way.
That's a game. That's a series I need to have remastered ASAP. I would love to play that on a PS5 engine.
Yeah, man. Tell me about it. And like, it's just, I love his portrayal of Batman is so well equipped for video games.
Yeah, yep.
Like when you get to like a certain thing where like you have to use a certain gadget, and he's just like, I should use this.
Yeah,
thing. And I'm
because
just like,
all that dialogue could be so clunky, but it works because it's Kevin Conroy's voice telling you that you should do this. The Batman you grew up with is telling you that you should do these things.
Yeah, like you have to use this particular, and I mean, not for nothing, but like for my money, it's some of just his strongest character work in those 3 games.
And it's funny, I was going to say that. I think because I know people have their issues with Arkham Knight, but the game I really want to highlight is Arkham City. I think it's by far the best of these games.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece.
It's one of the greatest games, period. But what makes it work so well is that it's the idea that he's dying. So Batman's dying, he gets infected, and the journey he goes on after he finds out it's like an odyssey he goes on. It's truthfully incredible, but it's just the small moments that Kevin Conroy gives you when he's kind of talking in the dialogue that he's provided. It's so you feel for him every second because like he truthfully dedicated his life to being Batman this whole time, and it's now looking back on it retroactively, like Kevin Conroy did dedicate his life to giving us this Batman that we can all, find comfort and solace in and live with and ride or die for with, like just this Batman that we all can fall in love with.
Yeah, I had stumbled across a clip of him talking when he was serving dinners to first responders after 9/11. And he was swapping kind of like war stories with these other guys. And the one guy's like, oh, I'm an architect. And what do you do? And Kevin Conroy was like, oh, I do voice work. And the guy recognized him immediately. He's like, you're Kevin Conroy, like you do Batman. And, he tells his buddies and he's like, and nobody believes it. And they're like, make him prove it. And then Kevin Conroy does the I Am Vengeance. And they're like, oh my God, that is Batman. And then the thing that got me is, Kevin Conroy recounts this guy saying to him, "So what's it feel like to be Santa Claus? Because that's what just happened here." Like that's the type of gravitas that he had. Like he was almost like this mythical, mythical person. Like you, even though you're just the voice, you're Batman.
Yep.
And in a way, he's almost more immortal than the live action characters, because like you said, when you pick up a comic or read a Batman panel like on a screen or something, you don't go to anyone else's voice other than his. You know what I mean? So even though, and we'll talk about his live action performance in a second, but like even though he never truly got to portray the character in live action, he's still the definitive Batman, because I always default to when you read the character's words, what voice do you hear in your head? And it's his. And I think that's what makes him the definitive Batman, is that's who you hear when you read the page.
You got to think a lot of these other Batman pulled elements from him. Just some of the subtleties in his voice. You got to think a lot of them, understood where they were coming from, as you should, in a lineage of what you're pulling from Batman. But like you said, it's no better way to put it that anytime you read him or you watch him, you just think Kevin Conroy's voice. It's subconscious almost. Like you don't even think about it. Like I said, I remember vividly because I hadn't read Batman in a long while, and I hadn't read comics in a while, and I remember the first thing I picked back up when I got my own money and I got my own job was Flash Rebirth, and then Batman shows up because it's like a big homage to the Flash essentially. And the first all I'm thinking is these Justice League Unlimited characters' voices in there, and then you get to Kevin Conroy, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna read some Court of Owls. I hear it's good, and then immediately it's Kevin Conroy's voice is the only thing that's booming in my head while I'm reading this. You put on a little Batman score, and you read that, and you think his voice.
I mean, one of the most iconic pieces of Batman anything is Mask of the Phantasm, which is, again,
maybe the magnum opus of animation Batman superhero content.
Which is crazy to think about, that it came out in 1993, I think, and really still hasn't been eclipsed like to this day. And that's, again, a testament to how much work and dedication he put in that character. I'm really partial to his performances in Injustice, Injustice 1 and 2. Again, anytime it felt like he reveled in the opportunity to just do something a little bit different with the character anytime that he got a chance to. And I think Injustice is a great example of that, where, there's a lot of conflict within Batman during both those games and that entire story, if you want to run through and read the entire saga of the comics that tie into it. And I really appreciate, again, it all these different companies that develop these series or these shows or these games. Who's the person that they always try to get to voice Batman? And man, just those Arkham games are spectacular. And I guess, the big question on everyone's mind was always like, is he ever going to get the chance to play the character in live action? And for the longest time, it didn't seem like he would, because there was no opportunity there, because they weren't going to cast him in a film.
Nope.
The only Batman TV show running around was Gotham, and that predated a man-aged Bruce Wayne, so they couldn't do that. Lo and behold, people bash it all the time. We don't bash it personally, but people deride the Arrowverse. But one thing I think you and I can both agree on with the Arrowverse is it takes care of their legacy actors.
Yes, it does. Yep.
In a really special way. John Wesley Shipp, who played the Flash in the early 90s, was able to return to the role. Yep. Various roles throughout the series. We had I forget who plays Supergirl's mom on Supergirl, the name of the actress, but she was the original Supergirl. Linda Carter has popped up.
And it was even to the point they had their creators in there, like George, who did they have? They had
Marv Wolfman.
Marv
showed up.
Wolfman was he pointed out the fact that Superman, he loves when Barry Allen and
Supergirl team up.
Flash and Supergirl team up, and they were like, "The heck are you talking about? We don't live on the same Earth," which is kind of cool. But obviously, in Crisis, we get Kevin Conroy as Kingdom Come Batman, which is pretty cool. I've spoke my praises on that comic. I hope one day that the DCU is able to adapt that, because I think it would be the perfect way to kind of end that. And listen, as much as people hate Zack Snyder, if they were to give him a movie, I think that would probably be a cool movie to send him off into the sunset with. But yeah, Kevin Conroy gets his shot to play Batman in live action. I think it's funny because I don't know if it's because he passed away, but there's something okay with me about him not ever putting on the Batman suit, because we already know he put on that suit emotionally and spiritually. He never had to put it on physically.
Yeah, and he gives a tremendous performance. Again, I think, he revels in the opportunity to do something a little different. And that iteration, I know people had their problems with it, and they're like, you finally get Kevin Conroy, and, like, this is what you do with him. But, like, I think for, like, a one-off, I think it was great. You know, he got to be, like, the kind of old curmudgeon Bruce Wayne.
I hate everything, and the world's never going to change.
When Pat, walked over that line, I thought it was great. I thought as soon as, and it's funny the way that they frame it, you don't see him, but you hear him first. And I think that was very intentional. That you hear his voice before you see him on screen, because that's Batman at the end of the day, regardless of what kind of Batman he's playing, like, that's him. And it all goes back to, going back to when I mentioned up top, that the comic that he penned for DC, the Finding Batman comic, which is just sensational, where he talks about, his finding his public face, his own Bruce Wayne, as a gay man in the 50s and 60s. And obviously that stuff was not going to fly back then. And he talks about that, how people would get, hateful towards him, and he lost out on roles because the world told him he wasn't a real man. And then he was approached to play Batman and didn't know a ton about the character, and they explained to him, who Bruce Wayne was, and he has this duality about him. And about his parents, Kevin Conroy talks about how he lost his father to mental illness and substance abuse, and his mother passing away, but he understood what it meant to live a dual life.
Yep.
And that's what he decided to do. So he channeled all that anger and frustration and fear into his performance as Batman. And that's how he found his voice as Batman.
Right.
And, he thought that the real him was the best and strongest version of himself, just like Batman was the real and strongest version of Bruce Wayne. And he said he didn't realize that at the time, but he had been auditioning to be a superhero his entire life. And I just think there's something really beautiful about that he found himself in the character before the character found him.
Right.
And I think that's why his portrayal stands the test of time.
Yep.
Ultimately. Man. Yeah. And it's just, and obviously, the last thing that we heard him in as Batman was in Multiverses. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, that they got all the actors back to do all these characters. And it makes me even more happier now that he's gone, that he was able to do Batman one more time before he passed. And, it's just unfortunate that Kevin Conroy gone at the age of 66. I don't know if you have any final thoughts on Kevin Conroy.
I think we had everything. Thank you for everything that you've done and giving the voice to one of the most iconic characters of all time.
Definitely.
That's nearly impossible, but you made it possible.
Yeah, and I mean, we were going to do this whole episode on Kevin Conroy before the news broke earlier today about Jason David Frank, who portrayed Tommy Oliver in Power Rangers, passed away at the age of 49 due to suicide. Definitely not an easy thing to talk about, but an important thing to talk about, because this is a through line with a lot of men in particular, this idea of suicide, and how the percentages far outweigh men versus women, because men don't, often get help for their issues, and I'm not presuming that was the case with him. I mean, he's been pretty open about being a cheerleader for others who have overcome mental illness. So I do feel like it was something he was open about and also struggling with. And I mean, that's ultimately what the decision that he took in the end. I mean, he's had a tumultuous past couple of years. He lost his stepdaughter also to suicide, was suffering a divorce, and that stuff, no matter your outlook, no matter how loved you may feel or how loved, the community thinks you are, it may not be enough. I mean, we suffered the loss of Robin Williams some years ago, and the first thing people always say is like, oh, like, how can this person be so miserable when they're, famous and they have all this to their name and, people adore them. But at the end of the day, if you're not happy within yourself, like, all that other stuff is superfluous, and it's not like he was hard on his luck. He was, very active in the community. He was still going to cons, meeting fans, doing Zoom calls, cameos for people. And I mean, at the end of the day, that stuff obviously gave him great joy. And I mean, it could have been a factor for why he was even still here now.
Right.
It's anytime like we said, it's Kevin Conroy, 66, died from cancer. It's horrible. We talked about, the pains of cancer with Chadwick Boseman, but when you lose someone like this, that was so iconic and so heroic to so many people, to something like suicide, it takes on a totally different kind of lens.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's upsetting. It's frustrating. But I mean, this is somebody that he's such an action star for kids. That's a big piece of why he's so iconic, is that it's one thing to have these action stars for adults, but having an action star for kids at that time, especially in the mid to late 90s, and then him going on with it too. That's why I said it's pretty unique about this, is that the two of them are so synonymous with the one thing that they did. It's one of them is the voice of one of the most iconic comic book characters of all time, and the other one is the face of one of the biggest kids franchises ever. I know I made the point to you, this Power Rangers is unique in the fact that it's high-paced, hand-to-hand combat for kids to watch and have fun, and so many people, including ourselves, fell in love with it. And I know for myself, like I said, I was such a massive Power Rangers fan. Like it was the thing of my childhood was the Power Rangers, and Tommy and Jason David Frank were there the whole time. That's what I think is really special about him, is that this legacy that he created, it never wavered. It just didn't. He was, like you said, he was going to cons all the time. He was seeing people all the time. And on all accounts, it's the same thing, that he was just such this wonderful man that would love to talk about whatever's going on and just enjoyed the fans, which is anything anybody can ask for. I think he understood the weight that was on his shoulders of, carrying this legacy for this huge franchise, but also kind of having some fun with it. And I know we watched a couple videos of him actually fighting. He was an 8th degree black belt. So you can tell he genuinely dedicated himself to being the Green Power Ranger and being a Power Ranger and being a face for so many kids everywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so interesting. Like you said, Kevin Conroy was the voice of one of the most iconic comic book characters who's ever lived. Jason David Frank almost had a harder job.
Yep. Right.
He had to legitimize himself and legitimize a character that most people probably wouldn't particularly care about.
No, I mean, you go back to 95, and it's interesting because it's cool that we have two different perspectives, because obviously you were young, but you still could kind of remember, like, while it was happening, it was such a big thing because that's when Fox Kids was releasing episodes Monday through Friday. So he literally owned a week for kids. Like, there was a week, the Green Ranger arc over that week, like, Jason David Frank came out of nowhere and was one of the most iconic kids characters on screen. And then you take him away for a little bit and you have the mystique around the show as if he's coming back. Like, he made that must-watch TV for kids on a narrative base in live action, which is insane. And then you get him
for
back
the Power Rangers.
For the Power Rangers, yeah.
Goofy, tropey Japanese offshoot kind of dubbed weird thing.
Right.
And still people were able to attach to him.
Yeah, and it's to the point where it's like all the way through all of our childhoods up into our adulthoods, we still were, checking in on Jason David Frank, seeing what he was doing, him having fun, like him going to cons all the time, him doing some videos where he'll actually fight himself, which I think is just the coolest thing in the world. Like, that guy was just such a cool cat. Like, he was just such a cool person that really you can tell, like, hopefully he loves the fact that he can be that for so many people.
I think he did, and I think, that's always the thing that people go back to when suicide comes up, is that obviously, like, he didn't feel loved, or he didn't feel like he was doing enough. I don't think that's I don't think that's always what it is when it comes to that. I just think those events cascade in your life, and you just feel overwhelmed, and you make a decision, and you're unhappy, and you make a decision, and that's it. And the people around you live with that decision, and it's just really unfortunate. And it's like you said, I think frustrating is the right word, and not frustrated.
Yeah, that I'm mad at him or anything.
Right. It's just, it's frustrating in the sense that, like, he's just gone.
Yeah.
And I being an adult, it's so crazy, like, being an adult, or being in my 20s and seeing, like, a YouTube clip pop up of, like, oh, like, he came back again for, like, a thing.
Right, yeah. And I mean, the big one from, I believe it was 3 years ago, was the 25th anniversary of Power Rangers, where he obviously headlined, I think it was like 15 plus old Power Rangers coming back for, like, the grandest team up of all time. And who's the guy that you're going to as the leader of this whole thing? You're going to Jason David Frank, because he's the face of this. And you gotta think, if you don't have that arc with him in 1995, are you even getting to the point where you have this grand crossover that adults are talking about?
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting, like, he legitimately made Power Rangers credible for generations. And in my opinion, and I'm not just saying this because he passed away, I genuinely think Jason David Frank himself, being such a cool guy and such a person that was dedicated to this kid's show, and made sure, like, these kids had some heroes when they were younger, got them 25 seasons, or 25 plus seasons, and 20 iterations of the Power Rangers. Like, he in my opinion got them all of that.
And you see, especially when it comes to, like, kids shows or whatever the case is, actors get so jaded about them, whether it's because they feel they've outgrown them, or they feel they've been pigeonholed in those roles, or maybe something legitimately happened on set that turned them off.
Right. Well, that's what happened to the original Blue Power Ranger. Yeah.
Yeah. And for him, he just stuck with it when he could have done so many other things.
He could have, yeah. Because he could have taken, like, a Michael J. White approach and, dedicated it, been like, I'm going to stick with my martial arts, but I'm going to do some other movies with martial arts. He truthfully said, I'm going to keep this legacy of this great kid show alive. I'm going to do that. And that's where it comes to, like, somebody like me who had Dino Thunder was, like, the first full Power Rangers run that I was watching. And then I'm seeing this guy, and then it gets to the episode, I believe it's episode 5, where it gives the legacy, and I was just like, oh shoot, this guy actually was on Power Rangers before. And then you go down the rabbit hole for 3 months to watch everything that he kind of created there, and it's just like, even watching it as not fresh but fresh to me, it was like, he still was the coolest character in that entire like, he came out of nowhere and was just like he wasn't a dark version of them, but he was just a different version of them that was intriguing in the way that they kind of utilized him. Like, what kind of kid show was taking the wherewithal to think about all these things?
And he really was, like, a real, like, he played a superhero.
He did play, yeah.
Like, they were all kind of superheroic, but, like, Tommy Oliver had, like, the duality of, like, a superhero.
He had a cool arc too. He had a cool arc up until Turbo. Like, it was a cool arc he went on because he teetered the line of evil. He had to think about like, what kid show was thinking about all these things? Like,
there was a darkness within him that, like, had to get explored. Right. Like, I'm not as familiar with the later seasons of Power Rangers, but there's a whole arc around him, like, doing battle with his past selves.
Yeah, that in Dino Thunder he has the if I can remember correctly, I think it's about him getting his Dino Gem back. Something like that, and he kind of has to face the 3 iterations of himself, and like he goes through his Zeo, and then he goes through the White Power Ranger, but the one that he really needs to deal with that all the fans would have seen is the Green Ranger, and like the darkness that came with the Green Ranger. So,
which is crazy for like a kid
show, yeah.
to tackle like the inner turmoil of light and darkness, right. And it's just. Like I said, he was the first superhero to me. Like that's really what it comes down to. Like anytime we would get on the playground and we'd, obviously play make believe and play Power Rangers, like the fight was always to be who got to be the Green Ranger. You know what I mean? Who got to be that guy? Because everyone knew, like across every class, like the Green Ranger was that guy. Right. Like everyone, he was Superman. Like basically, that's the most eloquent way I can put it is the Green Ranger. Tommy Oliver was Superman, and Jason David Frank by extension was Superman because, like I said, you can get me coming back. Even today, like if he were to pop up in a Power Rangers episode, like I'd be locked in.
And I think that's what that 25th anniversary did, is kind of explore that and explore the legacy that not only Mighty Morphin itself left behind, but like he's ingrained into the DNA, which is Power Rangers, both on a narrative level, Tommy Oliver, but for the actual franchise itself, Jason David Frank is.
Yeah, just had so many memorable moments and episodes, like when he came back as the White Ranger.
Right, where he like descends out of the ceiling to drop down.
Like he's Superman.
Right. The 1995 movie is definitely iconic, and a lot of people remember the arc that led into Zeo, Forever Red. We just watched a clip from to get ready for this. But again, because the Red Ranger's the guy, before it was, it's Tommy Oliver and the Green Ranger, but the Red Ranger for seasons, that's the main guy. And I mean, for the first 4 episodes, essentially, Jason was that guy. You're the main guy. But then you launch into Forever Red, and it's 10 years of legacy, and who's at the center of all this but not Jason David Frank? So it tells you how much he meant to everybody there, whether it be on screen or off screen.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's this incredible through line. Like I think the legacy of both Kevin Conroy and Jason Frank is legacy and longevity. Both of them got to experience almost parallel careers as those characters. Sure. In a weird way.
Yeah, because they started around the same time, essentially, because 92 and 95.
Yeah, it's really interesting and sad that both their lives have concluded at such similar time frames when their careers both got started around the same time. And obviously there's an age disparity between the two of them. Kevin Conroy being 16 years, Jason David Frank senior. Yeah. And yeah, it's just an incredible just 1-2 gut punch to people my age, people your age too. I mean, again, it speaks to that longevity piece that both of them were able to touch so many generations.
Right. And I bet there's people that are older than you and younger than me and still feel the same way that we feel right now. That's how much their careers have been immortalized and how much we remember them.
Yeah, and it's just like you said, just in a blink, it's it's over. And excuse me. It's just really unfortunate that just like it's that's it. There's such a finality to it, and we just experienced it with Black Panther.
Yeah, it was the beginning scene in Black Panther is like it's the beginning of it. It's just like that beginning scene in Black Panther is like it's real, and then I mean, along with Letitia Wright's performance, Shuri's in moment. It was the end. Like it truthfully was the end, and it was the way this morning that it happened, because nobody knew if it was real this morning. That was what was really bothering me, and I couldn't think about it. Like I was just like, I didn't want to believe that this was real for Jason David Frank, because it was in the manner of which he passed away is why I really didn't want to believe it this morning, and then it became real, and then it became really real.
Yeah, and just like with anything like this, there's just this sobering finality to it that, like, you're never going to see this person again. and you're never going to hear this person's voice again.
Yeah.
And I mean, that transcends entertainment and celebrities to just real life.
Right.
And, you know, just thinking about family members or friends that you've lost to suicide or other things, and just the sobering finality that, like, whatever the last moment that you have with that person is the last moment you're ever going to have with that person. And there's nothing that can ever quite prepare you for that. Especially when it's someone that was like a voice that you essentially grew up with, and have become so familiar with, and a person that you've grown accustomed to seeing, you know, one way or the other. And it's just incredibly sobering to try to wrap your mind around the fact that, like, that's the end of it. Like, the last time you see them is the last time you see them. And, I don't know. I don't know what else to say, honestly. It's, you know, again, just especially surrounding Jason's situation, it's never easy to admit that you are struggling with mental health, emotional health, but just always being present. And if you're someone that's fortunate enough to not be struggling with those things, just making sure that whoever it is that you have in your life, just making sure that they're okay whenever you can check up on them. You know, there's always a fine line to walk with, you know, prying versus just like being genuine. And I think that's a fine line to walk, but who better to know that line than the people that you surround yourself with? And I just think anytime situations like this arise, there's always going to be questions, and people are always going to feel guilty. And if they could have done more, or if they did enough. I mean, we see there had been quite a few posts about that today from people close to him, regretting, you know, not picking up this phone call or not answering this text. And I hope there's people out there that don't feel responsible, not just for his death, but just anyone who loses their life to suicide. I hope genuinely that you don't feel responsible for those things, because even people that take their lives know that the people around them did everything the right way, and to not feel responsible, and they just weren't. It's not that they weren't at peace with the people in their lives; they just weren't at peace with themselves, and they were in a war that they didn't feel that they could win. At the end of the day,
send that text, call that person, go see them. It's infinitely better than seeing them in a place you don't want to see them. So if you need, reach out. It's the best way to do it. Even to that person you haven't spoke to in years. You don't know if that's the thing between keeping them here and not.
Yeah.
And it's always better to do it than not.
At the top of this with the description, I'll post the suicide hotline number. I think that's ultimately, as much as this was a remembering of these two 90s icons, it was even more important to me to get the conversation, particularly around Jason David Frank's passing, into this as well, because it's, like I said, it's something that seems to be, obviously it's a plague on just the population in general, but particularly the male population is particularly susceptible to this, just because of the stigma around masculinity.
Yeah, and he had to play somebody so tough too, which is also so much tougher. And adding the celebrity aspect, which we think these people above us and these figures instead of actual people, but at the end of the day, they were born the same way you were born, and some of them grew up the same way some of you guys grew up, and how we were raised and grew up. They just so happened to get an opportunity for something that they worked hard in, but that does not take away their humanity at the end of the day, and it never will. I don't care whatever thing that anybody says about any celebrity, it does not take away that they're a person.
You know, I know people probably wouldn't hear this, you know, but it makes it harder sometimes, because, you know, we talk about how he made all these appearances and met all these fans, and I can guarantee you, as someone who doesn't have any of those responsibilities, how difficult it can be sometimes to just get out of bed and not want to talk to anybody, and I'm nothing. Like, I'm nobody. Like, I don't have any responsibilities anywhere near that. Like, I don't have my paycheck, you know, my cash flow, you know, depending on my appearances that I make and making people happy. Like, and there are days where I don't want to talk to anybody, and where I get, you know, in a bad place. And I can only imagine how many days someone like him woke up like that, but he did it anyway, because he knew, again, it goes back to like that love piece. He knew that he was loved. He knew that what he meant to people. It's not that he didn't have that kind of mindset. It's just, you know, he, like I said, he was in a battle that he didn't feel like he could win for whatever reason. Right. And, you know, we can't make that presumption, but yeah, that's ultimately the end all of this, is just, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to people, and don't be afraid to reach out for yourself either. You know, if whether you feel like you might need help and you feel some type of way about it, just do it. Ultimately, like that's what it comes down to. Like, if you think that it's better for you, like don't feel stigmatized by what people might think or what people might say or assume about you. Like, at the end of the day, take care of yourself above all else. That's really the message that I could put behind it. Yeah, I mean, anything else you want to add?
No, I think we've added everything we've needed to add. Thank you is the only thing that I'd add to both of them. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, just two definitive legacy heroes, superheroes. Is the best way that I can put it. I don't really have anything else to add. Anything that I would add, I would just circle back to everything else that I talked about.
You guys know our socials.
Yeah,
know
I'll link all that stuff at the bottom. Like I said, I'll link to the Suicide Hotline. I'll post that out with this episode when it eventually goes up. Yeah, it's just an important conversation, I think, that everyone should have at some point in their lives, especially as they get older, especially with the kind of pressures of especially the last few years, with the pandemic and, you know, kind of being the rise of like social isolation is kind of running rampant. And, you know, I know people don't maybe think that's that big of a deal to not have like that social interaction, but like it can really be affecting to people.
Right.
And, you know, just coming out of that, nothing's been the same since then, and things will continue to not be the same. So it's just about adjusting. And like I said, if you feel like you need help, seek it. If you feel like you can be that help to somebody else, be it. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Next week we'll get back to talking about the stuff that we love, and I think, what is it, Andor, right?
Yeah, it should be. Andor should be. Yes, Andor should be next week.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Well, like I said, all the socials are linked. I'll do all the necessary things that I have to do on this end to make sure all that stuff is linked, and we'll see you next week for Andor. Goodbye.
Peace.